Welcome. You're watching Gravitas with me, Raisha Sehgal. On the show tonight, Europe and Ukraine have been thrown into a turmoil after US President Donald Trump's conversation with his Russian counterpart to end the Ukraine war. Concerns are mounting that Europe will be left out in the cold by Trump and will be forced to work with Russia to end the war. Also on Gravitas, we will tell you about Ukraine's internal tensions, with the lawmakers storming the country's parliament, voicing outrage against Zelensky's crackdown on opposition figures. We will also get you a roundup and key highlights of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's two-day visit to the US. All that and a lot more lined up on the show tonight. Let's get you started. Our top focus on the show: Putin is getting what he wants. Since his hour-long call with US President Donald Trump on Thursday, Europe and Ukraine have been thrown into turmoil, pushing back against comments coming out of Washington, D.C. They are reeling from the Trump administration's statements. Well, Trump's Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has warned NATO allies to spend more on Europe's defense and not turn Uncle Sam into Uncle Sucker. He has ruled out NATO membership for Ukraine and dismissed the possibility of restoring all of Ukraine's lost territory. To put it simply, Putin is getting exactly what he has long wanted. And all of this, they all are a big win for Russia, if you're wondering how. Because all pretense of Ukraine's sovereignty and its right to negotiate its own future disappeared the moment Trump phoned Putin and seemingly conceded to most of Russia's demands. And that's even before formal talks to end the war began. A great collision has begun, and this is just the start. On Friday, French President Emmanuel Macron warned against a peace deal over Ukraine war that would amount to capitulation. In an interview with the Financial Times, Macron said that it would be up to Ukraine to discuss issues of territory and sovereignty, and insisted that Europe has a role to play in regional security. Meanwhile, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer affirmed that Ukraine was on an irreversible path to NATO membership. Starmer said this to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in a phone call. Now, these statements just expose the growing rift between Europe and the US, and that is over Ukraine's future. European leaders fear that Trump and Putin are negotiating Europe's security architecture over their heads. They believe Trump has already handed Putin several concessions, and the discomfort is both obvious and unsurprising. After all, for nearly 8 decades, Europe has depended on the US for its defense. Now, that entire arrangement seems to be at risk. Zelensky is worried too. Speaking at the Munich Security Conference on Friday, the Ukrainian president warned that Russia could attack NATO as early as next year. And that's if the West does not provide firm security guarantees. He has been pushing for such guarantees to be a part of any potential peace deal. And of course, Europe has every reason to be concerned. Russia is a nuclear-armed state. Europe, meanwhile, relies heavily on the US nuclear umbrella. So far, there's been no talks of withdrawing that protection. But many European nations see America's continued military protection as essential for their survival. The question is, can Europe defend itself without American cover? Observers say that Europe is not moving fast enough to find that out. On Friday, NATO chief Mark Rutte admitted the same.
Can I be very honest about my European friends? I really believe what Europeans have to do now is to come up with the concrete plans. One, to get more military aid to Ukraine.
And so, as Europe grapples with the possibility of America's abandonment, it's Putin who is having the last laugh. Trump, the self-proclaimed deal maker, has publicly suggested that Russia should keep some of the Ukrainian territory it has seized. After 3 years of war, the American president has also suggested that Ukraine will not join NATO, the trigger to the 3-year-old war altogether. All this is exactly what Putin wants to hear. But there is more. Trump has also ruled out sending US troops to Ukraine. He's insisted that any European peacekeeping force must not operate under NATO banner. So that means that the US would not be obligated to intervene, even if that force is attacked. Yet, despite his reluctance to defend Ukraine, Trump seems eager to cut a deal for Ukraine's rare earth minerals, the rare earth materials. They are important to American high-tech industries. And so, even before the talks begin, Putin has secured another long-standing demand: direct negotiations with Washington, D.C. without Ukraine. Or is European allies at the table on terms that only suit Moscow? Meanwhile, his forces continue to advance on Ukraine's battlefield. Putin's decision to double down on his war objectives appears to be paying off. Moscow has already dismissed Zelensky's recent offer, which included a proposed land swap. Moscow has circled back to its real demands, which are: number one, Ukraine's disarmament; number two, an end to Western military aid to Ukraine; and thirdly, a pro-Russia stance enshrined in Ukraine's constitution, with Ukraine struggling to sustain the fight with Russia's military. And Moscow is in no mood to compromise on any of these three demands. The big question is, what kind of deal can Trump secure for Ukraine? We'll have to wait and watch. As for Europe, the clock is ticking and Uncle Sam is open for serious business. We now shift our attention to Ukraine's internal political tensions. Lawmakers stormed the podium in the country's parliament, the Verkhovna Rada, voicing outrage over Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky's latest crackdown on opposition figures. The trigger, if you're wondering, it's his administration's decision to impose sanctions on former President Petro Poroshenko. Videos on social media from the scene show angry MPs holding banners and chanting against Zelensky, accusing him of silencing rivals and centralizing power in his very own hands, calling Zelensky's leadership as a dictatorship and warning that the political repression is deepening in Ukraine. Well, according to reports, the demonstrations follows a controversial move by Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council, which is a body directly under Zelensky's control, that accused Poroshenko, the former Ukrainian president, of treason and placed him under sanctions. Zelensky reportedly swiftly signed off on the restrictions, extending penalties to other high-profile individuals as well, including billionaire Igor Kolomoisky, who is already in jail and Viktor Medvedchuk, the former head of the banned opposition platform for Life Party. Zelensky has long vowed to root out figures he claims have betrayed Ukraine for personal gain. But experts argue that his so-called anti-corruption campaign is merely a cover for eliminating political threats. And the backlash was immediate. Poroshenko's European Support Party staged demonstrations inside the Rada, which is the country's parliament, unfurling banners with messages, and I'm quoting here, "No to dictatorship" and "No to political repression." MPs shouted shame, reportedly bringing the parliamentary session to a halt. According to reports, Poroshenko, who led Ukraine from 2014 to 2019, has now become one of Zelensky's most vocal opponents. He reportedly took to Meta, blasting the sanctions as unlawful and personally orchestrated by Zelensky to sideline him. He also claimed that the authorities blocked him from attending the Munich Security Conference. Concerns over political freedom in Ukraine have intensified, and that since the Russia-Ukraine war broke out. Zelensky has been accused of banning opposition parties, tightening control over the media, and postponing elections under the pretext of martial law. In fact, his presidential term officially ended in May 2024, yet elections remain off the table. Even Washington has started to express unease right now. Just yesterday, US President Donald Trump said Ukraine will have to hold elections at some point of time.
Are you freezing out President Zelensky of this process a bit? Isn't there a danger of that?
No, I don't think so, as long as he's there. But, at some point you're going to have elections, too. You're going to have an election.
Trump also hinted that Zelensky's political future looks bleak. Zelensky's poll numbers are not particularly great. To put it mildly, Trump said, and I'm quoting here, remarked. In fact, Keith Kellogg, the U.S. Special Envoy for Ukraine and Russia, earlier this month also called for both presidential and parliamentary elections to be held in Ukraine by the end of 2025, further emphasizing that a democratic system cannot function without elections. If Zelensky seeks re-election, he may face a serious challenge. According to local reports, his decision to remove Ukraine's former top military commander, Valery Zalensky, has created a powerful political rival. A survey conducted by Ukraine's Social Monitoring Center just over 2 months ago shows that Zalensky commands major public support, with 27% of Ukrainians favoring him in a potential presidential race, while only 16% back Zelensky. So, will Zelensky hold elections in Ukraine in the near future? That remains a question at this point of time. Regardless, it is clear that the battle for Ukraine's future is far from over, not just from the outside, but also within. We now turn our attention to the latest in southern Lebanon, where Israel's deployment remains a contentious issue. And that's despite previous withdrawal agreements. Well, according to reports, Israel has further extended its deployment in southern Lebanon, raising questions about whether it will ever fully pull out or not. US has reportedly given the green light for an extended Israeli military deployment in southern Lebanon. This follows reports that Israel had requested more time beyond the February 18th deadline to withdraw its forces. And that's under the truce agreement signed last November. Israeli troops had a 60-day window to leave. That's after launching a ground offensive against Hezbollah in October. The same deal required Hezbollah fighters to exit the region, with Lebanese troops stepping in to take control. Initially, Israel was supposed to complete its withdrawal by January 26th. That deadline was already extended to February 18th. Well, according to reports, Israel seeks to maintain its deployment in 5 strategic positions in southern Lebanon for at least 10 more days, signaling further delays in the handover procedure. Despite the ceasefire, Israeli military action continues in Lebanon. On Thursday, the Israeli army claimed it had struck multiple locations in southern Lebanon, citing intelligence that the sites contained weapons stockpiles, including rockets, explosives, and firearms. While a fragile truce has technically been in effect since November 27th, reports from Lebanon claim that Israel has violated the ceasefire more than 900 times. These breaches include deadly attacks and injuries inflicted on Lebanese civilians. The situation remains volatile, with Hezbollah warning of retaliation if Israel refuses to leave Lebanon. Meanwhile, France has also stepped in with a proposal to ensure Israel meets its withdrawal deadline. French Foreign Minister revealed a plan to replace Israeli forces with the United Nations peacekeepers, including French troops, and they will be deployed at key locations along the Israel-Lebanon border. He emphasized that this arrangement would address Israel's security concerns while clearing the way for a full withdrawal.
We have worked to formulate a proposal that can satisfy the security expectations of Israel, which plan to stay longer at certain points on the blue line. We are going to propose that some of the most seasoned UNIFIL contingents, including the French contingent, can replace the Israeli armed forces on these observation points.
According to Barrett, the UN has supported this initiative, but the challenge lies in convincing Israel to accept the plan. Meanwhile, tensions are escalating on another front. Lebanese aviation authorities have reportedly banned Iranian airlines, Mahan Air and Iran Air from landing in Beirut. This decision follows Israeli allegations that Iran's Quds force has been using civilian flights to funnel money and weapons to Hezbollah. Israeli military spokesperson Avache Adrai took to social media claiming that Hezbollah has exploited Beirut's international airport to fund its operations against Israel. Lebanon's move sparked immediate backlash. Hezbollah supporters flooded the streets, blocking roads to the airport and setting tires on fire. Demonstrators waved Hezbollah's yellow flag and held up images of Hassan Nasrallah, Hezbollah's former leader, and Qasem Soleimani, Iran's slain military commander. Clashes erupted between demonstrators and Lebanese soldiers deployed to maintain order. Videos circulating online show intense scuffles as demonstrators resisted attempts to clear the area. Well, according to reports, in response to the growing crisis, Lebanon's Civil Aviation Directorate announced emergency measures, arranging an urgent flight to transport Lebanese passengers stranded in Tehran. In the latest, Iran has barred Lebanese flights from repatriating stranded citizens. Reports also stated that the Lebanese government is implementing heightened security procedures at Beirut airport, with additional measures set to last until at least February 18th. Now, that date holds major weight, major importance. It marks not only the real deadline for Israel's withdrawal from Lebanon, but also the full implementation of the ceasefire that ended months of fierce fighting between Israel and Hezbollah. The big question remains, will Israel ever leave southern Lebanon, or will it just find new reasons to stay? In a big boost to US-India bilateral ties, US President Donald Trump and Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke about a host of deals, from Washington supplying F-35 fighter jets to New Delhi, importing more US oil. A lot more was discussed. Take a look at the big moments from Prime Minister Modi's US visit.
missed you a lot. Here's some of our friends.
और मेरे लिए खुशी की बात है कि मुझे इस कार्यकाल में राष्ट्रपति ट्रंप के साथ फिर एक बार कार्य करने का अवसर मिला है। मैं कह सकता हूं कि राष्ट्रपति ट्रंप के पहले 4 वर्ष का मेरा जो अनुभव था, जो गर्मजोशी थी, जो उत्साह था, जो विश्वास था, वही गर्मजोशी, वही उत्साह, वही विश्वास के साथ हम फिर एक बार साथ मिलकर के आगे बढ़ेंगे।
Starting this year, we'll be increasing military sales to India by many billions of dollars. We're also paving the way to ultimately provide India with the F-35 stealth fighters.
मेक इंडिया ग्रेट अगेन, यानी मीगा। जब अमेरिका और भारत साथ मिलकर काम करते हैं, यानी मागा। मागा प्लस मीगा तब बन जाता है मेगा पार्टनरशिप फॉर प्रॉस्पेरिटी।
Let's also tell you what else is lined up for you on the show today. Well, African leaders are meeting in Ethiopia this weekend with an aim to launch a new push for slavery and colonial reparations. Also on the show, we will tell you about the latest Tesla Cybertruck crash and how it further raises questions on the software's capability. Finally, we will also tell you about how the loneliness epidemic has become more of a security crisis and how you can safeguard yourself. US President Donald Trump's offer to sell the crown jewel of American military aviation to India marks a pivotal moment in global military dynamics. As New Delhi weighs this $100 million fifth-generation fighter proposal, the F-35 fighter jets, the decision could reshape the balance of air power across Asia. Our next report telling you more.
Stealth aircraft are virtually invisible. They are designed to avoid detection by radars or air defense systems. Armed with cutting-edge avionics, pilots to spot an enemy plane first, fire a missile and destroy the target without the adversary being able to react. Now India is gearing up to have fifth-generation jets in its arsenal. The big question is, which fighter jet India will opt to buy? The US is offering its most advanced fighter jet to India.
Starting this year, we'll be increasing military sales to India by many billions of dollars. We're also paving the way to ultimately provide India with the F-35 stealth fighters.
Trump's announcement, with Prime Minister Modi at his side in the White House, potentially opens the door for India to join an exclusive club of nations operating the world's most sophisticated stealth fighter. India is yet to make its mind, but Trump's offer sends shivers down the spine of Pakistan.
Pakistan is also deeply concerned over planned transfer of advanced military technologies to India. Such steps accentuate military imbalances in the region and undermine strategic stability.
The timing of America's F-35 offer comes a day after an unprecedented duel between the American F-35 Lightning II and Russia's Su-57 Felon during an aero show in Bengaluru. So how do these two frontline jets compare? The F-35's impressive specifications, including a top speed of Mach 1.6 and a combat range of 1500 kilometers, come with a hefty price tag of $80 to $110 million per unit. In comparison, Russia's Su-57, boasting Mach 2 speed and 1900 kilometers range, costs significantly less, at $35 to $40 million US. However, the F-35's advanced avionics and established global supply chain offer distinct advantages. The decision isn't straightforward. Despite the advantages, US defense deals often come with strict conditions, including restrictions on technology sharing.
So we would really have to see what conditions are attached. Will there be only economic, monetary conditions, or there would be other things? History says that the Americans, like any other country, are very sensitive to their geopolitical needs. Please do remember that when we had the Pokhran II in 1998, the nuclear blast, the first country to impose sanctions were the Americans.
India must weigh these factors carefully as it charts its path toward military modernization. Meanwhile, India's indigenous AMCA stealth fighter project aims to deliver 7 squadrons by 2035, pushing the country into an elite club of stealth aircraft manufacturers alongside the US, Russia and China. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Shifting our focus now to Africa, where countries are uniting to demand reparations from their former colonizers. Yes, you heard that right. African leaders are meeting in Ethiopia this weekend to launch a new push for slavery and colonial reparations. As the African Union prepares for its 38th summit, the central topic will reportedly be a joint push for reparations. African leaders reportedly aim to define a unified vision for reparations, which includes financial compensation, a formal acknowledgement of historical wrongs, and comprehensive policy reforms. Well, the African Union's reparations agenda, adopted in 2023, seeks to address the lasting effects of slavery, as well as colonial exploitation of Africa's economic development and inequality. Beyond financial amends, the leaders are also expected to call for land restitution and the return of cultural artifacts that were looted during colonial rule. Discussions will also focus on combating economic inequality, racism, and Africa's marginalization in global affairs. But the push faces the risk of being stonewalled by former colonial powers, most of which have ruled out making amends for their historical wrongs. While the issue of reparations has gained momentum worldwide, so has the backlash. Many of Europe's leaders have opposed even talking about it. But their unwillingness to talk about it does not change facts. From the 15th to the 19th century, at least 12.5 million Africans were kidnapped, forcibly transported by and mostly to European merchants and sold into slavery then. African Union's Economic, Social and Cultural Council has said that the debate on reparations needs to be addressed. The Council has said that the legacy of slavery that we see today in the form of racism and economic disparities between Africa and wealthy Western nations, it needs to be addressed. Africa's current debt crisis can also be traced back to African nations being saddled with heavy debts upon independence. Then there is the issue of climate change. It is also linked to colonialism. Africa is responsible for just a fraction of carbon emissions, but its fragile ecosystem have borne the brunt of global warming. And that is why the call for reparations have taken an important dimension today. Advocates of reparations say that they are more than just compensation at this point of time. You see, much of the debate around reparations, particularly in former colonial powers such as Britain and Portugal, focused solely on financial payments. But advocates say that making amends for the past actions can take many forms. African Union's Economic, Social and Cultural Council head, William Caro, has said, and I'm quoting him here, reparations are more than just compensation. It is about ensuring future generations inherit a world that acknowledges their past and propels them towards a brighter future, unquote. But 30 years since the AU's forerunner, the Organization of African Unity issued a declaration demanding reparations. There has been little progress. Just take these examples, for instance. In Portugal, which enslaved more Africans than any other nation, far-right party Chega has proposed charging the president with treason for suggesting there might be a need for reparations. Then in Britain, right-wing populist Nigel Farage has said that Prime Minister Keir Starmer would be weak, and that is if he engaged in talks on this issue of reparations. Lastly, in France, President Emmanuel Macron has ruled out reparations, calling for reconciliation instead. With the former colonizers unwilling to engage in a debate, is reparation and the justice of that possible ever? Well, it's Valentine's Day today and love is in the air, and many may be tempted to go on the dating apps. But before you swipe right or left, be aware of who you're talking to, as your search for a soulmate could land you in a scam. Yes, you heard that right. As AI blurs the line between what's real and what's not, the lonely and the vulnerable are getting increasingly targeted online by scammers. We know that loneliness is a growing epidemic worldwide now. But did you know that the loneliness epidemic now threatens to become a security crisis as well? And that's as more people get lonely and have very less social interactions, they are becoming more endangered to digital frauds. Experts are calling it romance scams. So what are these romance scams? It requires attackers to build relationships with their targets. That's the first step, and that happens through dating apps and social media. These types of scams are also called confidence scams. As the name suggests, the fraudsters use social media and dating apps to exploit people's weaknesses and their loneliness, and criminals will use a range of tactics to entrap their victims. They do this by building up their perceived romantic ties. This includes asking intimate questions from the potential victims, questions that only a trusted close friend would ask. For example, questions about their past dating life or the dating history. Further, attackers also build intimacy through a technique called love bombing. Terms of endearment are used to try to rapidly advance a feeling of connection with the target. As romance scams progresses, it is very common for attackers to start saying that victims are their girlfriend or boyfriend, or even call them husband or wife, as a way of showing their love or signaling their devotion. Another tactic with criminals on dating apps includes telling their target that they were previously scammed and are therefore skeptical of trusting anyone new in the future. Well, this makes it seem like less likely that the person the victim is chatting with could in fact be the scammer himself or herself. When it now comes to extorting money from the victims, this vulnerability is the key. They will do things to make it look like they are facing some kind of cash flow problem. They maybe a few weeks later bring the topic back up again, at which point the target may want to help and offer to send money. According to reports, in a lot of cases, criminals find romance scams successful with people who are already struggling with feelings of loneliness. And this is why romance fraud is such a big business for scammers. Well, people in the US have reported that they've lost at least $4.5 billion to romance and confidence fraud. That's over the past decade. This is according to an analysis of the 10 years of dating till 2023. From the FBI's annual internet crime reports, and according to the FBI's figures, romance and confidence scams have led to losses of around $600 million for each of the past 5 years, except for 2021, when losses peaked at almost $1 billion. Some estimates place that number even higher. Romance scams begin all over the internet. Sometimes criminals put out messages on Facebook to hundreds of victims at a time. And in a dating app, they do this by matching with every profile they see. They're just swiping right. As for who are these scammers and where they are based, a variety of criminals run romance scams from West Africa to Southeast Asia. And these frauds are growing into a more organized form. Individuals are hired from all over the world, meaning that they can target all different kinds of victims. Some criminals in Southeast Asia are reportedly building AI tools into their scamming operations. In fact, in October last year, a United Nations report said that organized crime efforts have been AI to cheat victims while engaging in real-time conversations. And that's in hundreds of languages. According to the FBI, AI allows criminals to more quickly message victims. Ultimately, romance scams cost victims hundreds of millions of dollars a year. But as people grow increasingly isolated and as scammers scale their crimes using AI, the problem looks like it will only get worse with time. And we have some breaking news coming in from the Munich Security Conference, where Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that he is ready to meet Vladimir Putin face-to-face once Kiev and its allies agree on a plan on how they want to end the war. Zelensky has also claimed that Trump had given him his personal number. He made the comments at an event at the Munich Security Conference, adding that Trump had told the Ukrainian leader, "You can call me anytime." Zelensky is scheduled to meet the US Vice President J.D. Vance in a short while from now. Well, it's a developing story which we are tracking very closely. Our next story is about Tesla Cybertruck. A Tesla Cybertruck in self-driving mode has crashed into a pole in Nevada's Reno City. The crash resulted from a failure to merge correctly, which means that the Tesla Cybertruck failed to merge out of a lane that was ending, further crashing into the pole. This incident has intensified concerns over the dependability of Tesla's full self-driving software, further casting shadows on Musk's plans for a robo-taxi service launch. Musk had just last month touted the immense improvement in the safety protocol of its technology, asserting that people who are skeptical of the Tesla technology should try it themselves now. However, the latest Cybertruck accident is a warning sign about the safety of the technology and Tesla's readiness to take the driver out. Unlike other automakers which use redundant technologies for safety, Tesla's approach relies only on cameras, making it cheaper but also riskier in challenging conditions like heavy rain, snow or fog. The accident shows that there are problems with Tesla's full self-driving nighttime detection abilities. Data mapping and vision-only approach as well. Tesla has for years faced criticism and investigations over the safety of its advanced driver assistance software, following several crashes in the past as well. As of October 2024, there have been hundreds of documented non-fatal incidents involving Tesla's autopilot and self-driving features. The latest Cybertruck crash is still a reminder for the world that the technology is essentially not there yet and raises one pertinent question. Can Tesla's self-driving software be trusted? Are you tired of receiving spam calls and messages? Are you one of those who have the DND or Do Not Disturb feature turned on, but you're not sure if it's effective enough? Well, looks like things are about to change, and for the better. Indian telecom regulator TRAI is cracking down hard on scammers and spammers with new stricter rules. Telecom operators are now required to actively monitor call and SMS pattern. They're required to flag any suspicious activity to the telecom department. This includes activities like unusually high call volumes, low incoming to outgoing call ratios, and short call durations. Misreporting this will result in hefty fines. The fine will escalate with each subsequent violation. According to the new rule, the initial fine has been set at rupees 2 lakh, that is around $2,300, and the maximum penalty is rupees 10 lakh. That's approximately $11,000. The idea is to create a less intrusive and more consumer-friendly telecom environment and to identify potential spammers in real time. The new rules will also make it easier to report those annoying calls and texts. All you have to do is report the spam to your telecom provider, post which they are required to take action against the scammer within the next 5 days, as opposed to the previous rule of 30 days. So that's faster and quicker. Spotting spam calls will also be simpler. Telemarkets can no longer use regular 10-digit numbers. Instead, promotional calls will start with the 140 number series, while important service and transaction calls will use the new 1600 series. In other words, the Telecom Authority has made it mandatory and compulsory for telecom providers to offer customers the option to opt out of promotional messages. However, users can opt in if they want to. Meanwhile, repeat spam offenders will have the telecom services suspended by their providers. This means no calls, no texts, nothing. TRAI has also introduced specific headers for different types of messages to make it easy for the consumer to know what kind of message they have received. And lastly, telemarketers are now required to disclose the use of robocalls and ensure transparency in all forms of communication. With these new rules, TRAI is putting consumers back in control. It remains to be seen how effectively these regulations will be enforced. Hopefully, these changes mean less unwanted calls and texts for all of us. Hollywood star Scarlett Johansson has issued warning about the dangers of AI after being caught in a deepfake scandal. The fake video that recently surfaced shows Johansson and other Jewish stars from Hollywood demonstrating against rapper Kanye West. In the morphed clip, Johansson, along with David Schwimmer and Jerry Seinfeld, are seen wearing a white t-shirt with the slogan, "Enough is enough, join the fight against anti-Semitism." The actor has made it clear that while she does not tolerate hate speech, she is equally alarmed by the growing threat of AI, which she believes could make it difficult to distinguish fact from fiction. The Black Widow star stated, and I quote here, "As a Jewish woman, I have zero tolerance for anti-Semitism or hate speech in any form. But the real danger in life in AI's ability to amplify misinformation, making it an even bigger threat than any individual spreading hate," unquote. Meanwhile, Kanye West has been making headlines once again. He recently referred to himself as a Nazi and praised Hitler in a post on X, before announcing that he was shutting down his account. But his online rants did not stop there. West continued targeting the Jewish community, repeating anti-Semitic remarks that had already sparked massive backlash. On the personal front, some reports recently suggested that West and his wife, Bianca Censori, were heading for a split after the controversial appearance at the Grammys. However, their representative has shut down these claims, calling them fake rumors. It remains to be seen how Kanye responds to the matter. Well, it's Valentine's Day and it's the perfect time to discuss love and finances. What is the cost of love this Valentine's season? Our next report telling you more.
Romance and love is in the air, but the wallet feels the pressure. The latest Lending Tree survey of over 2,000 customers indicates that Americans in relationships are allocating an average of $179 for their Valentine's Day dates. While some couples are embracing the romantic holiday, most are swiping left. Almost 50% of those surveyed said they would happily forego the holiday and cost entirely if given the option. About 1/3 of Americans consider it worthwhile to demonstrate their affection for their partner even if they have to take on debt. Most plan to cut back on their spending this year compared to 2024. About 60% think inflation has made it more difficult to purchase Valentine's Day presents. Flour prices usually soar, and the surge in cocoa prices have made chocolates more expensive. Prices of cocoa, a key ingredient in chocolate, have increased relentlessly to new records over the past year, forcing companies to hike the prices of their product. The cost of almost everything have surged, making romantic gifts such as food and jewelry more expensive. Inflation is clearly hurting, with nearly 40% surveyed not expecting any purchase gifts this time around. Even the perception of how to celebrate this Valentine's has changed compared to last year. About 25% of Americans now perceive a restaurant date as a show-off and unnecessary. While still, based on data from Wallet Hub, a financial information site, Americans are expected to shell out $25.8 billion this year on Valentine's Day. That puts it in the third place among the most expensive holidays. The inflation bite is not restricted to America alone. Globally, too, prices pressure have hurt household budgets. The sentiment of a cutback is similar across the world for Valentine's Day spending. Still, the industries that rely on Valentine's Day business are hoping for continued celebrations. Gift shops, florists, restaurants, jewelry stores, and Valentine's Day theme makers for brand building are some of the businesses looking at their margins amid elevated inflation. Will price pressures hit Valentine's spending, or will love take over? This is Bureau Report. WION World is One.
A humpback whale briefly swallowed a 24-year-old kayaker last Saturday during a father-son excursion out on the icy waters around Chile's southernmost Patagonia region. The horrifying moment was captured on camera by the kayaker's father. The video shows the whale briefly swallowing the kayaker before quickly releasing him unharmed. The incident, caught on camera, quickly went viral. Take a look.
¡Hey! Ya, vente, vente. Tranquilo, agarra el bote, agárralo, tranquilo, agárralo. Agárralo, agárralo, no te subas, agárralo. Tranquilo, agárralo. Agárralo, agárralo, vete para la orilla. Tranquilo, tranquilo. Ya voy, agárrate de la cuerdita. Agárrate de mi cuerdita. Tranquilo, agárrate de mi cuerdita. Agárrate de mi cuerdita de atrás, no me tumbes, no me tumbes. Eso, tranquilo, tranquilo. Tranquilo, tranquilo. Vamos, vamos.
Y empecé a flotar, ahí sentí el miedo de verdad de que también le fuese a pasar algo a mi papá, de que no hubiésemos llegado a tiempo a la orilla y me fuese a dar hipotermia.
It's now time for Gravitas Worldview. Here are the images of the day. On this day, February 14th, 1989, that's 35 years ago, Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei declared a fatwa against author Salman Rushdie, following the publication of his book, The Satanic Verses. The book's release triggered outrage, particularly in Muslim-majority countries. Rushdie's book posed a fictionalized account of Prophet Muhammad's life, which many in the Islamic world deemed disrespectful. Several nations, including India, Bangladesh, Sudan and Sri Lanka, they all have banned the book. As demonstrations against the book escalated, Ayatollah Khamenei issued the fatwa on February 14th and placed a $2.8 million bounty against Rushdie. After the fatwa, Rushdie, who lived in London at that time, went into hiding under constant UK police protection. He changed locations every few days in the early stages of his 13-year concealment. During this period, he adopted the pseudonym Joseph Antiton. Nearly 3 decades after the book's publication, a 24-year-old stabbed Rushdie multiple times just before he was set to deliver a public lecture in New York in August 2022. The attack left Rushdie blind in his right eye and inflicted serious injuries to his chest and thigh. The trial of this attack has started. It started earlier last week. Well, that's all that we have on today's edition.